Hey, this is Zac.
And I'm Clint, and we wanted to thank Exoterra for sponsoring this episode of Colubrid and Colubroid Radio.
Exoterra is the industry leader in glass terrarium enclosures, and we are a big fan of getting to see the species we work with both at home and at the university.
We utilize Exoterra caging here at Metazotics, and in addition to top quality terrariums, Exoterra offers an array of heating options, lighting, supplements, decor, and truthfully anything needed or wanted when keeping reptiles.
Thank you, Exoterra, for supporting Colubrid and Colubroid Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Colubrid and Colubroid Radio. Zac here, as always, with my brother from another mother, the one and only Clint Bartley. How are you doing tonight, Clint?
I'm well.
Are you?
So when we first hopped on, Zac asked me that, and he got a completely different response. But it's been a bit of a madhouse. It's been a day. We'll say that. So, and I'll go into that in a little bit on
Sure.
Well, I'll start it now. So obviously we've got Black Friday coming up, and as you know, that's a pretty big event out here at Metazotics, and not just because of sales. I mean, we make it a big deal, and today, the worst part of Black Friday prep for me happened today. And I'm sure everybody else on the team will tell you there's things much worse because they're the ones handling those. But for me, it's loading in the discounts because it's a nightmare. And I have to load in the discounts twice.
Sounds great.
And I'll explain why in a moment whenever I actually start talking about the market, because there's I technically wouldn't have to, but there's a reason I do it because it makes more sense to do it this way. But anyway, it comes down to the POS system and the online, how it looks online. That's what it's in. But the problem is, for me, why this is such a big deal is all of our animals are individually skewed, at least the overwhelming majority of them. And with that in mind, I have to do it every single ID. And while I can do certain groups, it's like not all black rat snakes are priced the same, and they're not all going to have the same discount, and they're not. So it's, and to put it in perspective, just in animal discounts today, I loaded in over $40,000 in discounts.
Wow.
Yeah.
Doing the Lord's work, my friend.
That was a good 6 hours of my time today. so yeah. I'm tired.
Yeah.
My head hurts.
Well,
my eyes hurt.
I hope you get some rest so you can do more of it tomorrow, or is tomorrow...
Now it's a little bit more physical tomorrow. It's going to be rushing to ensure that we have everything built that needs to be built, everything in play, and then we're able to get some things set up throughout the day tomorrow. But then it's once we close, we get everything, like our entire sitting area goes away, and then we set up tables show style, in that area, and so then that's when all the discounts get marked and everything comes out. And like the team hasn't even seen any of the discounts yet. I keep those private until then. Then here's the paper that's got, all of it listed out, so they know what to mark things down. Because we get asked a lot, So
I'm sure you do.
Yeah. So is this going to be on sale? Yes. How much? Can't tell you. So everything will be on sale.
Very good.
But yeah, so a little bit of a scramble that happens tomorrow, but I think we're in a pretty good spot for it. I say that, and we walked around about 30 minutes before hopping on this, and we just took in, everything that needs to be done, so that we can assign it, mark it off as we go tomorrow. And it filled an entire sheet of, lined paper. Just so there's still lots to do, but I think we'll get through it.
Well, while you're doing all that, I'm on break. And we're recording, so you can't say what you want to say. So anyway, no, I stumbled into this break. I wanted to be out of school today by 11:30, and I got out. Well, I know what time I got out. I got out at 10 till 2 because we had a meeting at 2, and I was like literally walking through the door to the house when the meeting was supposed to start. So anyway, but I don't know if people, which way do I need to lean? There you go. I got this tower of tubs over here. Those are all king snakes that are at their intermediate temperature, getting ready to go to the garage on Sunday for brumation. So that's that. At the animal collection at the university, holy mother of God, brumation. I normally do a lot with the brumation. This year I really didn't because we got the new conservation center. I'm trying to let my staff, who Tanya, go through brumation. It's she is having a really hard time understanding why we take animals that we normally keep at 90 degrees and then put them intentionally at 50 degrees for 3 months. So if you know these names, Lauren Mort, who's my assistant curator, I basically brought her into a room sometime last week and was like, Lauren, you're just in charge of everything. Because Mort's done this like 2 years now. But the new thing is like snakes are easy. I got the snakes down. These damn turtles, man. Apparently you bury box turtles. Didn't know that. Everybody needs to go onto YouTube and just look at some of the brumating box turtle videos, because I was watching them thinking, if I show these to the people at West Liberty University, they're going to lose their mind. Because people are digging like 18-inch deep holes in their backyard and being like, bye, Squirtle. And then they bury the turtle in dirt. And I was just like, there's no way that my people are going to be okay with that. So one of the cool things is my new building was an old restaurant. And so it had one walk-in refrigerator and then another smaller beer fridge. And the maintenance guys got those things turned on. And this is sweet. I got a walk-in refrigerator that's holding at 48 degrees, which is about as good as it gets for brumation. And then but for turtles, you go a little bit lower. So that's been my learning curve the past week and a half, is just trying to figure out how to communicate to people. It is okay for us to put the turtles in the refrigerator. And, and a lot of the turtles we received, they didn't come from captive breeding stock. They were animals that were intercepted. So they're not in the best of health, and we're trying to get them up. And I had to explain to people, we're not going to put things down in brumation that are sick. That is dumb. And I won't do that dumb thing. So this has been a little bit of an experience, but we're good. All's well. Moving on. That's where I'm at. So
yeah, we're on week 2, I believe, on clearing the gut of the collection, and then we'll be putting everything down as well. And kind of we're getting prepared for some shifts. There's going to be some changes. It starts with Steve. So Steve is going to be reducing down to about 2 days a week.
Okay.
Steve is an old man, and I hope he hears this. No, Steve's a great guy. Steve just basically, that was kind of something we had talked about in the beginning, that, eventually he was going to go down to a little bit more and more part-time. So he's going to go down to 2 days a week. And really, there's going to be certain things he takes care of, one of which are going to be all of our quarantine animals. He's going to be, and that's really why we're doing 2 days, so he can follow up on any medications and anything like that we're working on. And so he's going to continue doing that. And this all kind of takes place in January. Corey is going to then be stepping into the role of the full curator, back there.
Whoa.
And working on designing some new processes, things like that. So she'll be taking over the collection. And Caleb, who you met at Colubrid Fest, Caleb is going to be taking over the nursery. So we're having some shifts. Everybody's kind of, getting moved up there. And
so can I ask some questions?
Yeah.
Because I know Corey and I know Caleb. How in the hell did Corey dupe Caleb into this?
Caleb wants this.
Oh, dear.
Everybody wants the nursery. That is like it is the place that everybody wants. I mean, because you get to mess with so much. And then Corey will tell you, though, it's a lot more than what you think it is, when you first go in. But,
Well,
we've
congrats,
softened
Corey.
it. We've got Dylan back there, our intern now. And I mean, he is certainly helping out, and that's going very well. So and I also look to add 2 interns into the collection. So, there's going to be, it's more hands, but I think the whole purpose is not to make any of the jobs easier. That's not really what I'm after, although, it's a byproduct of it. It's more of, my chair somehow on my cord. There we go. It's more, I want us to level up on some things. I want better record keeping. I want, stuff that it takes time to do. And that's what, having the interns, we can do that while they're getting, a lot of learning at the same time. So again, we're just kind of preparing for a lot of shifts that are going to come in January, and I'm looking forward to it. So
yeah, okay, cool
stuff.
So, do we want to just dive right into the elephant in the room?
Yes.
Let's
How about
do
we
it.
talk
Let's
about
punch that elephant right in the freaking face?
You got it.
Okay, go for it, man.
Okay, buddy. So, as you guys, many of you are probably aware if you follow the Facebook group, the Colubrid Fest venue is no more. We lost the venue.
Bye.
And, we'll go ahead and address, yes, it was because snakes had gotten loose. I'm not beating anybody up over that whatsoever.
I'm not either.
Because I saw some getting kind of high and mighty, on a different post. And I'm thinking, I've been doing this over 30 years. And if you think for a second I haven't had a snake get loose somewhere, you're out of your mind. Most of us have. And if you haven't had it happen at a show, bravo. Tell me that you haven't had it happen at your home. And if you tell me you've never had a snake get loose at your house, I will welcome you because you're obviously new to the hobby. Okay. So, I mean, it's just part of it. We don't want that to happen. But accidents happen, right? So again, we lost the venue, and we kind of looked at it as, okay, that sucks, but maybe it's a blessing in disguise. Maybe it's forcing us to look elsewhere, and something kind of perfect happens. So who knows? With that in mind, we were getting on the phone, and we had a call with the 3 of us. Zach, myself, Mickey, and this first call was more or less we need to narrow it down to a handful of cities that we would consider, and then go do our research, go see what's available, and hit it from there. So I will be posting some kind of pluses and minuses that we've identified thus far with these 5 cities, but we'll go ahead and mention them now. That way, because we will be soliciting some feedback. But again, this is going to be a destination, no matter where we put it. So everyone needs to understand that.
Can I say something real quick?
Yes.
And with the cities, we're trying. Please understand, this is not as straightforward as one might think. We have to try to understand the laws. Try to accommodate, our core audience that's come for the first 2 years. We have to do a decision that last year we had the luxury of time. Now we don't. We're trying. Don't know if we'll pull it off. Faithful we will. Trying to get a venue locked in by the end of the year. That's literally like 38 days or something. So we are thinking of that. And when we put these venues out, we were thinking about airports. We were thinking about proximity to airports. And one of our goals this year, because it seemed to be something that people liked about Fort Wayne, we don't know if we'll pull it off. We are trying to. So we're trying to create a one-stop shop. So if we can get a hotel that we could have the talks in one room, the show in another, that way, in theory, if you can get an Uber from the airport to the hotel, you're basically where you need to be. Like that's what we're trying to do. So with that in mind, that has something to do with the cities that you're about to hear. Okay, because we are fairly confident, main phrase being fairly confident, these are cities that have rules that are not going to be exclusive and will enable us to have the animals at the show you all want to see. So, with that being said, go for it.
Okay. The first is a city that had been recommended to us. And so it's one that we're going to look at because it is, out of the cities we're looking at, it is one of two that I would say is the most centralized.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I know you guys are like, just say the damn cities. So there's something else I need to explain. There's another factor that we're taking into account here. Whenever we say centralized in the U.S., there's geographically centralized, and then there's population centralized, okay? And geographically centralized actually doesn't make sense, because geographically centralized, we're looking at like Oklahoma and, you know, in what I want to say maybe South Dakota, somewhere in that area. And unfortunately, while that's in the center of the U.S., you know, in that area roughly, that's not in a population center. It's actually far away. You have the bulk of the U.S.'s population is kind of East Coast, all the way north and south. Then, of course, you have some down there in Texas, and then California. You know, it's going to be much more spotty in the actual central area of the U.S. So that's why we're like kind of like, we need to make sure it is something where most people can travel to, but we can't make it perfect for both sides of the country. So, okay, the first one is Kansas City, Kansas, not Missouri. We actually, to be honest with you, we would freaking love to put it in St. Louis, Missouri.
That's where we want to put it.
Yes, that is as centralized with an airport, with everything. And it's got a strong reptile community out there. The problem is the laws are not colubrid conducive. It's a great place to go field herping, but because of the great natives they have, trying to do colubrids out there is not the easiest thing. We would really have to jump through a lot of hurdles when it came to things like hognose, black rats, even Texas rats now, speckled kings, bull snakes. Yes, all, you know, a lot of the biggies would be a problem. Now, it can be done. You have to get a permit, but then you also have to verify from everyone that you sell one of these to whether or not they are a state resident. And if they are a state resident, they have to have a permit before you can sell it to them. So it does become a bit of a hassle, and that's why we're like, it's probably not the best thing for us. So anyways, Kansas City, Kansas. And that's because obviously that's the Kansas side of Kansas City. You're going to have an airport there on the Missouri side. I think it's on the Missouri side. The thing is, we would need to look at laws and ensure that Kansas laws made sense for us, because none of the three of us were real strong in that area.
Yeah.
So it is something that we would need to look into. It may be something that knocks us out. It's also, in my opinion, one of two that starts putting us a little further away from, you know, the target area. The other one that is kind of the same, everything I just said about Kansas City, Kansas applies to the next one, Omaha, Nebraska. Now, I am very familiar with the city and the area. I spent a lot of time out there in my previous role. I love it out in Omaha. It's actually a pretty nice place. It's the home of PayPal and other stuff like that. The situation is the same. We don't know about all the Nebraska laws, so we would have to look into that deeper. Omaha does have an airport that you can get in and out of. We also tossed the idea that if Nebraska's laws worked, Lincoln, Nebraska would be a possibility, and that's because Lincoln is 45 minutes from Omaha. There's a lot of things that go on in Lincoln, and everyone flies into Omaha and just 45-minute direct shot, boom, into Lincoln. So,
and Mickey has a good venue there, which is why this was brought up in the conversation.
Yep. So again, those are the two that to me are the furthest out there. Next, Another one that has been recommended to us rather emphatically is Philadelphia. Pittsburgh, Philadelphia. I'm sorry. Yes. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, not Philadelphia. Blah. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And one, the laws are in our favor. We're pretty sure of that in all regards. It is it's in a high population area, but I do feel we start getting away. We start moving more north than center, if that makes sense. Okay. And so that's where we're a little hesitant to start pushing that far north. But it is on the docket. Another issue that we do have with Pittsburgh, it's got a strong reptile market, but it's also a saturated market. One thing I need to premise too, and I forgot to say this before we ever said a city. If you are a show promoter that has a show in any of the cities that we're naming right now, we are not coming for your place. We are not coming to put a show in your spot. We are not coming to pee in your sandbox, okay? If anything, if we figure out that a certain city looks very promising, my plan is to reach out to anyone who's got a show there to make sure that we, express we are bringing a once a year event that we hope while we're there, we can promote their local shows, and hopefully they'll do vice versa for us. We don't want to have it on the same time. We're not looking to compete. This, as you guys know who have been to Colubrid Fest, we tell you, it's not an expo. There happens to be one day of it. It's an event, and that's it. So please, if you are someone who has a show in Pittsburgh or the area, understand when we say that, we're not looking to step on toes at all. Okay? But when I say it is saturated, there's a lot of shows in the vicinity. And it's the show in Pittsburgh is even a monthly show. Am I right in that?
Yep. There's monthly, and then there's a big one at Labor Day and Memorial Day. Yeah. But I'm not, obviously, let's be real. Pittsburgh is the place that's close to me. There's a place, there's a borough of Pittsburgh, I guess. I don't know. A city outside of Pittsburgh. The airport dumps you into this place called Robinson. I have planned a lot of conferences and things around Pittsburgh, and I know that there's a lot of the hotels we're looking for. And if you can fly into Pittsburgh, you can probably get to the hotel that we pick, maybe with a shuttle, so it won't cost anything, or it would be a relatively cheap Uber. So that's part of the reason why, because we have heard you loud and clear. We want to make those ancillary outside expenses as low as we can make them.
Yep.
So there we go. Okay.
Next, Cincinnati. Ohio has been recommended, and from what I understand, Ohio is pretty open unless it's natives, but they don't have the morph exemption like Indiana does, which means the one I know black rats can't come to play. I mean, that's the one. And obviously, as the black rat guy, that sucks for me, but don't think for a second that I would let Ohio get marked off the board if we're only talking about one species that we can't have, so that's something that there is a strong Cincinnati show that takes place out there. Friends with both of those guys, Derek and John. So, and I haven't said anything to them, but if, this gets to you guys, trust me, we are not coming for your show at all. Love you fellas. And if anything, if we decided that that's a place we wanted to look, hopefully we'd have your support on it. But I do want to look a little bit more into Ohio laws. I'll probably reach out to like Rob Zirkle, because obviously he's going to know them inside and out, make sure that we're good there. But Ohio was one that was mentioned, and I think we all do like the center location that kind of provides, where we still keep it Midwest, but we're central in the overall population, piece. So
Cincinnati's, is it like 2 or 3 hours south of Fort Wayne?
That I know it's like 4.5, 5 hours from me here in Evansville.
Yeah, it's not that far from where the last one was. So there you go.
Okay, the last one. This is funny, how this played out, and I swear it wasn't me. Whose idea was this, Zach?
This was my idea.
Evansville, Indiana. Now, I can obviously sit here and tell you anything you want to know about Evansville. It is the home, or home adjacent, of Metazotics. Both. It's actually, there is not a Metazotics in Evansville, but there are Metazotics in 2 cities that touch Evansville. So, it's, obviously, you know, Indiana is a favorable area in terms of the laws. Evansville does have an airport. It's also, if you were coming to spend time, I mean, you're an hour and a half from Louisville, 2.5 from St. Louis, 2.5 from Indianapolis, 2.5 from Nashville. I mean, it's got the ability to have a pool. It's right there in the Indiana, Illinois, Kentucky. It's tri-state area. It touches right there. So, and I'll tell you something funny that just, I couldn't help but laugh as we were doing this, because we had more cities. You know, we this was a brainstorming session. We had more cities, and I said, okay, let's do this. I said, Mickey, what are your top 3 cities, you know, that you want? And he said, picked his 3, and I put an M, you know, to the far left of that city, put an M in front of those 3. Then I said, Zach, what are your top 3 cities? He told me his 3, put a Z in those top 3. Both of them had said Evansville so far.
Yeah.
And then I did the same thing with my top 3. And so basically, out of all of our top 3s, we narrowed it down to these 5. You know, that's if nobody voted for one of the other cities, we put it to the side for them. So at the end of it, Evansville had MZC next to it. What's so funny and coincidental about that is here at Metazotics, when we produce an animal, it obviously gets an ID number. And if it's a ball python, it gets MZP. Can you guess what the ID initials are for colubrids at Metazotics? MZC. So I saw that right there and I started laughing. It was almost like it was fate. Mm-hmm. Now, please understand, we're not pushing for it to be Evansville. We're just giving you a, you know, some comedic story that came with it. We're looking at all 5 of these pretty equally.
Well, let me roll in here for a minute.
Go ahead.
I kind of am pushing for Evansville. Not Clint. Not Clint. It was really funny because Clint was like looking around awkwardly when I did what I'm about to do. And then Mickey was like, yeah, what Zach said. Here's the thing about Evansville. We did Indianapolis first. We did the big city. And what happened? Everybody was paying like $30 freaking a day for parking. It took us forever to find a hotel because big cities are expensive to have events like this in. And that's just the way it is, guys. There's no way around that. And so if you kind of look at like a big city, if you kind of step back to those, not marginal, but like the second biggest city in a state or the third biggest city in a state, what you end up with in that scenario is you don't pay for parking. You can get a hotel potentially that's cheaper because we're reptile people. And well, it's funny that we can suddenly find $4,500 to buy a snake out of the middle of nowhere. But at the same time, getting to that place to spend the $4,500, that's like not okay. And so I personally think Evansville works, and here's why. It is centrally located. It has a freaking airport. It won't be that expensive compared to other places at all. We've got a guy that grew up there who's right there, and Metazotics is there. And whether we want to admit it or not, I think it's great. So now don't interpret what I just said as, oh my God, it's going to be at Evansville. It's not what I'm saying. I'm just simply saying it just made sense to me based off the criteria that we are trying to use because, and we also we don't want to push it too far west, too far east, too far north, too far south, because we have a group of people that have shown up for 2 years now. And we're trying to honor you all. So Evansville and Cincy, that's part of the reason why they were thrown into the mix, is they are the 2 that are the closest to Indy. So, or sorry, to Indiana, Fort Wayne, if that makes sense. So anyway, it was really, really funny, though, when I threw out Evansville, because Clint was like, oh, dear. So anyway.
I think it was because I got the vibe. I'm like, when we first announced it was Indianapolis, I know people think that was because of me and that I pushed it like that. And now we're literally putting it in my backyard, or suggesting that. And I'm like, man, I don't know how it's going to come across to everybody. That was my first thought when you said it. So, but right now, the steps that we're on, the ones that we're unsure about the laws, we're researching that. Mickey's team is looking at venues in all 5 of these cities to see what's available. We're still looking for the hotel convention center. That's what we really, really want. And so again, it being that we lost the venue we're in, okay, that opens us up to do this search in these cities. So that's where we're looking at right now. It's a good chance it's going to be one of those 5 cities. But if you guys remember year 1, it was curveball after curveball after curveball. Yeah. So, I mean, we don't know what's going to get thrown and what we're going to do, but we're going to make something happen. The downside is we're obviously going into the holidays, which getting communication from the hotel sales team is a little more difficult. But like I said, Mickey's team is on it, and we're going to see what we can come up with. If you have ideas on those cities, anything that you think we should know, shoot us a message. Let us know.
Yeah.
We're doing our best here. We want to make it we can't make it 100% where everyone's going to grade it. Perfect place, perfect travel time for me, perfect, but we're hoping to at least get as high of a grade as we can, across the board. So let us know.
There you go.
All right.
Okay. So, it's going to be really funny when we look back on this and the damn things in like Nashville.
No, Tennessee laws suck. Self-included.
Anyway. Okay, cool. But we are here.
Do you want to do the science update?
I'll do the science update, but one more thing. Just thank you all for being patient. And we really mean it. Throw out what you know about those places. Because the worst, well, there we go. Eric, I saw that in the chat. So Omaha might be a bad thing, might be a good thing. I don't know, but we got some info, and that's what matters here.
And that's the kind of stuff we want to know about, because I will say, as much time as I spent in Omaha, I never stayed in a hotel. One of my best friends lived there, so I was, shacking up at his place every time that I was traveling through. So that was a piece I wouldn't have known.
Okay. All righty. Moving on. You want me to do the science update?
Yes, please.
Okay, cool. So, science update, as always, brought to you by our friends at Rare Genetics, Inc. If you have a colubrid and you need to know the sex, by all means, send away a little piece of shed skin to Kayla and Ben, and they will do their best and get back a determined sex that you can't screw up because it's done with genes. So, there you go. And then, obviously, they're working diligently to figure out if our morphs are genetic and what kind of genetic mechanism are at play for corn snakes, king snakes, hognose snakes. I saw a thing recently for dry markin, not necessarily morphs, but paternity, so you can avoid inbreeding depression. And I believe that they're starting on Pitchophis soon if they haven't already. So get those sheds to them so they can help us colubrid keepers out. All righty. So today I thought about this long and hard, and I am doing a book, and it doesn't have colubrids in it. But I've noticed that when I make book recommendations, people listen, which is kind of nice because I'm a teacher and I spend all day talking to people, and they don't necessarily listen all the time. So thank you all for validating my existence. But anywho, the book that we're going to talk about today is an important one, and I actually have 2 copies. And even though this book has to deal with pythons and boas, and some of the stuff in it might be considered outdated, if you are building a herpetoculture library, you need to have this book in it. I would argue it's a classic. It was one of the books that I snagged early on, as soon as I knew about it, back around 2016, 17, when I was building my herpetoculture library. And that book is what is affectionately referred to by our Boyd friends as the Blue Bible. Here it is. And it's The Reproductive Husbandry of Pythons and Boas by Dr. Ross and Gerald Marzek. And unfortunately, Dr. Ross recently passed away. There is an absolutely epic, wonderful, very entertaining episode of Morelia Python Radio where they did a herp husbandry with Dr. Ross. It's one of my favorite episodes of that show. So I highly recommend you go and listen to that after this, especially if you consider getting this book. It's called the Blue Bible because the softback is blue. But like I said, I am kind of have a problem. And it's not snakes, it's books. The hardback is black. So, and this is pricey. This one will not fall apart in your hands. This one, if you start flipping it a lot, it will break the seam because this was printed in 1990. This one being the blue one. But the thing that's wonderful about this book is that Dr. Ross, basically, and Marzek, they have a wonderful introduction in there that goes over the basics of keeping pythons and boas. There's some really wonderful diagrams in here. Let me find the one. There's one that they diagram what an incubator should look like, which is one of my favorites. I actually have a picture of that. Here we go. Yes, schematic of an incubator, so you can see if you're taking a look. But what this book did is this book was key to many of the people that were beginning to breed pythons and boas in the 90s. They took this book and ran with it, and it basically built a foundation. And what's really cool about this book is that the point in 1990, all the natural history information that was known about the animals was basically put in here. The chapters are on genera and species. There's some really cool climatic data for species in here that's still relevant. And the reason why I like this is that this formed a foundation for me when I was writing my book, because what I was trying to do was figure out like what the hell outline or schematic to the book do I want to follow. And this particular book was one of the ones that I landed on. I was like, oh, I really like that. Like I said, some of the information in here is a little outdated. Like some of the temperatures that are recommended are very high compared to where we keep boas and pythons today. But I just can't recommend it enough. And if you're trying to have a serious herpetocultural library and you want to have some classics in there, pick this thing up. Another thing that I want to do real quick before I turn this over to Clint is a couple people asked me, where do you find these books? So let's talk about that. I am going to literally give you my dealer. So it sounds like I have a bad habit and you're, my dealer. But that being said, Mike Crick Books. I cannot recommend Mike enough. He has tons of books on reptiles and amphibians. If you get onto Mike's Facebook page, he has albums in there, and he normally takes a picture of the book. And he has regional albums in there. He has species albums in there. He has herp history books in there. He's got a Ditmars album, if you know who Raymond Ditmars is, who wrote many of the foundational books in the turn of the last century. And Mike's just a really good guy. He does he can find books for you. Yeah. I definitely told Mike, I want this one. And then within 3 weeks, he's like, all right, I got a copy. And I got to give him props. So I just bought a brand new box turtle book that came over from Spain, and it came in damaged. And I told Mike, hey, this thing got kind of busted up. And without asking any questions, he was like, all right, I'm sending you another copy. Keep that one. So, he could have fought that. It was an expensive book. I was going to try to buy the book, but buy another copy of it. But yeah, so if you want to get these books, he is a very valuable resource, and he's been a part of herpetoculture now for quite some time. So there you go. That's all I have. It's up to you now.
All right, buddy. Well, the market update is brought to you by Show Me Reptiles, the Show Me Reptile Show, and Show Me Marketplace. As we say, Colubrid Fest couldn't, would have never occurred if it wasn't for Show Me, Mickey and his team, who are diligently working on making sure that it's coming again. So if there's a Show Me show near you, please go visit, support those that support us. And by us, I mean us in the Colubrid community. Okay, so with this week's market update, a few things. Typically, the 2 weeks leading up to Black Friday are quiet and soft. And that has not been the case in my experience. And twofold this year. One, in store, it's been kind of insane. So I was scheduled to work this past Saturday, and Wendy said, one of us needs to be in the woods, and it should be you. Which, because we're in our gun season out here for deer, and I'm like, okay, no problem. If she's like, it's going to be slow, we can take care of it. So I took Dex, my son, he and I went and sat in the blind and had a good time. Didn't see a deer, but it was still nice bonding. Well, they were slammed. And it's funny because I was off, Ox was off, and Henderson, Landon, and Caleb were off. It was all girl power in Metazotics on Saturday, and they crushed it. It was to the point where she's kind of giving me a dirty look when she gets home that night because I didn't work, even though she's the one who told me that I needed to not be there.
Married.
Yes. But nonetheless, it was, the week in store, because what we were amazed at is at this point, locally, everyone knows the Metazotics Black Friday event. Everything's going to be on sale. So we see like new animal sales dry up like that, or any big purchases dry up because everyone's waiting for the sale, and we expect that. That's not been the case over these last 2 weeks. It has still been very, very strong in store. Now, that obviously is going to be more of a regional, and micro piece with us specifically. But on a macro level, which is our online business, I have had tons of inquiries on animals. I'm getting offers made constantly, getting messages constantly, and we've had a lot of online business. And I don't know if that was a lot that we're trying to rush to beat the kind of shipping cutoff dates.
Mm-hmm.
But it's been an unusual November in terms of sales and movement of animals and products. So hopefully everyone who's listening that does have animals that they are looking to home somewhere else, get your ads posted, have it out there, because it's still happening. It's still happening. I want to say I got in trouble today with Morph Market. Got my hand slapped. My fault. So Morph Market has had it posted, no live animal shipments from this date to this date. I took that as insurance isn't going to be available, so don't ship. I've always had it in my kind of policies of on Thanksgiving week, I will ship that Monday. That's my cutoff day if weather permits, because if there is a delay, I still have Wednesday for it to arrive. So I shipped on Monday, shipped 4 packages. 1 has been delayed. The other 3 got there just fine. But I did get a message from Morph Market scolding me. Sorry, Morph Market. I deserved it. They had it out there. I just took it wrong. It wasn't an arrogance thing, I promise. I respect anybody's terms. Anybody, if this is how you have it listed in your business, then that's fair. So, but if you do ship through Morph Market, that's cut off right now. Don't do it. So I don't want anybody getting in trouble on their accounts. I don't want to get in trouble on mine. So, but I wanted to share that. I have 2 other things with this particular update. So this is not out yet, but I got my hands on it. So Reptile Basics, Vivarium Electronics, makes some super nice sliding glass enclosures. In my opinion, there's some of the nice, it's a similar style that you see, kind of made by several companies, sliding glass door, PVC, thin PVC sides, metal corners, the pieces go in. So Dubia makes them, but from what all of them I have tried and tested, these I like the best. They seem to be extremely sturdy. They're very well made. I mean, very, very happy with them. In fact, it's what we carry in store as far as for that style of caging, because I'm that big of a fan of them. So if another company has done this already, I'm not aware of it. But Reptile Basics has now taken their 4x2x2s, and they now have an option, or they will have an option, where there's a tray that goes inside of the bottom, or actually the bottom is glass, and it can hold water. So basically, one of the complaints previously with any of these types of cages is you can't really do bioactive with it, because they're not, if you spray or anything like that, it can leak out of the sides. Not with this. So you can set these 4x2x2s up fully bioactive if you want to. And we just got them. We got one. That Rich sent it to us so that we could, put it together, look at it. And he sent it to us for our Black Friday event. So these aren't even on his website yet that I've seen. We don't have them in the store yet. However, some lucky individual here in the Evansville area is going to have one of the first ones available in the country, because they're going to win it on Friday.
I saw them when I was down there picking up. Mm-hmm. And actually, it's funny because we're talking about water snakes tonight. And I literally told Rich I will be buying those. No, they are slick.
Yeah.
Super really cool.
Nice. Talking about water snakes, I thought we were talking about greenish rat snakes and whether they're a great rat snake or the greatest.
He's not even on to defend himself, dude.
I know, that's what's funny. So we can see Chris Montross right now. You guys can't. And so I just
we might have just seen a bird. That's right.
So
okay. Don't make me throw him on screen.
So this product, it's really cool, and I think that really, as far as pricing, it sounds like it's not going to be that different. There's probably going to be a little bit more of an increase because you're talking about a heavier weight, and the box is bigger and whatnot to ship it. But overall, really cool. Really excited that we're getting to put one of these together and have our eyes on it. So there's that. Just want to tell you about a new product there, and finally, it's my turn, Zach. I have a retraction.
Oh, yes.
So, on one of our, maybe the episode before last, it was the episode with Dr. Oz. I made a statement, and the statement was that the number of reptiles in U.S. households has surpassed cats and dogs combined. And I had someone reach out and email me, asking me about that statement, that basically they were looking at, and they were discussing it with others, and they were looking for it, and they couldn't find a study that was saying that. And I'm like, no problem. Reply. And I want to make sure everyone knows I actually loved this email because it was polite, it was professional.
Yeah, it was awesome.
It wasn't a, can you prove that? No kind of vibe like that whatsoever. And real quickly after I got that, I'm looking through the computer I have here at Metazotics. And the reason is because, and I'll explain this, where I got that was a study that was done in 2019, or it had information through 2019. And I purchased this study because you could only get a snippet of it online before. I purchased this, and the reason I purchased it back in 2021, I believe, 2020 or 2021, was part of my business plan that I was writing for what eventually became Metazotics. Because back then I didn't know if I was going to need any additional funding from an outside lender, and obviously you're going to need a business plan if you're doing that. So I wanted to have as much information as I could. So I looked, real quickly online and through my folders and whatnot here on this computer, but I wasn't surprised that I didn't have it. However, while I was looking, one of the associates comes in and sees, all this documentation that I'm scrolling through, and asked me what I was doing, and I explained what I was looking for and why I was looking for it. And they go, So does it drive you crazy that you say one sentence on the show and someone's going to ask you, about it? And I go, no, honestly, it doesn't. And the reason is because I know that one of the reasons this show is as successful as it is because we are looked at as telling the truth. Whether, and I don't mean like, oh, they speak the truth. No, just meaning we're down to earth. We walk the middle. And if we're going to say something, we want it to be factual. So if somebody questions us, I'm all for that 100%. So anyways, I went home. I found my old laptop, the one that I would have had during all this. Look through it. I can find the business plan. I can find where I am talking about things from it, but I cannot find what I did with the actual study. I can't find it saved on the computer anywhere. I don't know what I did with it. So with that in mind, I cannot back it up. So I cannot cite the source. And being that I cannot cite the source, then I can say either I was right on what I said and I can't back it up, or I read something that I'm remembering incorrectly now. And Zach, you and I talked about this, and you said, I've heard this somewhere else too.
Heard that.
Well, now I'm afraid I've said this more than one place, and I'm hoping it didn't circle back, and that's where you got it. But nonetheless, I said something that I can't find the source for, so I can't back it up. Therefore, I am going to retract that statement. And thank you to the listener that emailed me asking me about that, keeping us honest. I greatly appreciate that.
Yep. Now, if you know the source and you have the paper, please, for the love of God, send it to us, because we've been talking about this now for 2 weeks. So there you go. All righty. Are we ready to bring on?
I think so. And our guest segment, as always, is sponsored by Herpetoculture. Herpetoculture has great products Zach uses for incubation out there at West Liberty. Here at Metazotics, we use it for boas, for ball pythons, for Asian rat snakes. I mean, lots of stuff with Herpetoculture. So hop on Herpetoculture.com or Metazotics.com. Get yourself some Herpetoculture and support those guys.
All righty. And so today we have one and only Chris Montross, Darkhorse Herpetoculture. If you don't know about Darkhorse Herpetoculture and you're listening to Clubbered and Clubbered Radio, not that I'm shaming you, but you should probably feel a little bit bad about yourself. So with that being said, Chris is a longtime friend of the show, longtime friend of Clubbered Fest, and most importantly, longtime friend to Clint and I. And I know this makes him feel weird when I say it, but I do consider him a mentor, especially with the locality keeping, because while I have the fancy degrees, Montross, I don't even know how his brain works and how he can remember some ditch that he caught a Nerodia in when he was 18 and the weather was 72 degrees and the wind was coming out of the southeast and there was this much water height. I mean, the level of detail that's locked up in your brain is insane, and I'm very impressed by it. So with that being said, we're talking Nerodia today because we somehow have not done this, and everybody knows I'm a Nerodia file, and we know Montross is a Nerodia file. So with that being said, welcome to the show, Chris.
Appreciate it, guys.
No problem. So last time we had you on, I guess Matt was around, which was a while ago. So while you've done it already, maybe the Cliff Notes version, but talk about how you ended up, how Darkhorse Herp ended up happening.
Well, I mean, are you talking about the name where I'm at now? Is that what you're meaning?
So
I'd give a little more background on you, because I think it's been such a long gap since you were on that, obviously we've got some people listening now that, probably want to know a little more about you.
Grew up in Central Florida, originally from New York. Grew up herping and running around in the woods as a little kid in the Orlando area, catching banded water snakes and yellow rat snakes and all the other things in the area. Started keeping stuff after keeping fish because I wasn't allowed to keep any herps, snakes specifically, in the house. So eventually, with my dad's help, I was able to start slipping some snakes into the house, and turtles and lizards came in a little easier. Snakes was a little harder. I was mostly keeping lizards and turtles uh, after I moved out of fish in elementary school, but started keeping ornate box turtles and alligator lizards, curly tail lizards, things like that. Somewhere about seventh grade, I guess, somewhere around there, maybe six, seven, somewhere around there. I learned about through a classmate, the Central Florida Herp Society in Orlando, and everything's been more or less downhill or uphill depending on how you take it from there. It just opened up a world that I never knew existed because I didn't grow up with herp peers or anything like that. You know, I had a couple little books that I still have on my shelf over here um, to help me identify stuff and that sort of thing as a kid. And once I was able to get down to Edgewater High School and see all these great talks from people, you know, whether it's Rob Whitaker or Bill Haas, we got to see a little bit of everybody, back then come and talk at this high school down in Orlando every month. And it was just amazing, and it just gave me a window and angles and opportunities to meet people in every facet of herp. Because I was keeping a little bit of everything back then. So that led to going to zoo school and going to the zoo field for over 10 years and leaving that and just doing herps on my own time and field herping all along the way, more or less.
Very
All
cool.
right, there we go.
Because I mean, it sounds like you were keeping and kind of playing with a lot of different variety back then. How did you start to gear more towards for those who don't know Chris Montross, heavy into locality, known for locality rat snakes, known for locality Nerodia, water snakes. How did you start to shift into such a kind of niche direction?
Some of it was wanting to avoid all the extra, it's not really expense, more the risk and the danger of all the extra heating and stuff that's usually required with a lot of the exotic stuff, being able to keep them and manage them in captive, situations in our homes, and that, I know a lot of people that had fires over the years. So I wanted to try to work with something more familiar to what I'd been seeing my whole life in the woods and having a great appreciation for, but that I could also manage in a more ambient, less risky and intensive sort of situation, I guess, from at least the way I used to always keep stuff. And I even did at the zoo with just heat lamps and endless heat pads and plugs everywhere and just really trying to make all these micro habitats and the risks and the fire risks that go with that. Just known too many people over the years that, have had, catastrophic or even minor accidents. And so I kind of was like, I should really just try to work with some stuff that I really like. But in the past, I'd avoided it because of finding a market. Because spent all my adult life here in Alabama and going to the Dixie Reptile shows that Terry Heron had always done since late '90s. It was always the market wasn't there for usually anything I had an interest in. Some stuff I could sell here and there, but usually anything I bred was like not what was an interest here. So somewhere back in the late aughts, early teens, late aughts, I guess. I don't know, when I got on social media and was able to realize that I could connect with all these people that like these common, basically junk snakes for the most part to the hobby that I always avoided because I could breed them and keep them, but you had no outlet for babies. You couldn't give babies away, right? Like you could. So I'd avoided it. But once I realized that hey, I can connect with people literally all over the world, I was like, I could do this and I can show people how cool these animals are, and I can find people that actually have an interest in the stuff that I actually enjoy working with. So it kind of just stemmed from that ability to connect in the same way we are right now in multiple parts of the country.
I want to expand on that for just a second because you you're kind of proving a very great point. And when, like you said, how people would see these as junk snakes, and my guess is now you don't have any problem moving them, do you, Chris?
It comes and goes. I mean, the market is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes of the year they move better. Some years certain things move better than others.
Mm-hmm.
Certain things I breed are hella popular with people, and others are like literally nobody cares. But
Yeah.
it's
Mm-hmm.
just the market fluctuates. So it just I take it as it comes.
So what I think is so neat, and it's funny because when I talk to someone about like this show, if I'm describing it to someone who's never listened, I tell them there's one thing that you'll need to know going in, and be cautious. You're going to want just about every animal that you hear an episode on. And the reason is it's
Mm-hmm.
not because you're hearing all the information about the animal. It's because the individuals that we have on are experts on those animals because they are passionate about those animals. And that's to me one of the things that why the Nerodia has risen in popularity. Locality pieces have risen in popularity because the individuals, yourself, Chris, that keeps and breeds and works with them, when they get to talking about them, because I remember the first time you and I met talking about some of this when we were out at dinner that day, and hearing
Mm-hmm.
the passion of what you were keeping and what you were working with, and that I think really it creates a market. It's not like the market just kind of starts to happen. It's the passion of individuals who are working with something that creates a market and expands upon it. So I guess I just want to take a second and discuss that because it's something I say all the time, that it's not about selling reptiles. It's about sharing passion, and that's what makes things kind of take off. And you've certainly grown that. I've seen in just the past several years the popularity of Nerodia specifically starting to rise and rise and rise. And I think that it was a big part of your passion, and then exponentially growing that passion in others.
I agree. I mean, it literally was 110% my goal. Like, somewhere I had started keeping rats again in like the early teens. Once I hooked up with one of the buddies that I do my rat snakes with, and like knew him through field herping. I didn't realize he kept a collection at home, and he's just a field herping guy that has his rat snakes from different parts of the country that match the old Peterson's field guide from the 50s, right? And once we started talking, I realized he kept stuff, and I started keeping some rats, with him and stuff. And then like my wife and we've shown dogs for like 30 years, so we were down at a dog show down in Florida, and it's wintertime, like it's cold out, and we're in the RV, and I've been walking dogs, and I realized these couple little retention ponds at this venue that we've been at multiple times over the years. I was like, crap, there's bandits everywhere in here. And I was like, I'm gonna catch some of these tonight, and I'm gonna take some pictures of them in the morning, and I'm just gonna photo document them, that sort of thing. Nothing more than that. Just because there was a lot of phenotypic variety within these little small retention ponds on this property. And so I caught up a half dozen, eight of them, I don't know, whatever it was, that kind of all looked different. And I was literally just taking photos of ventrals and dorsals and doing a more of an educational sort of a concept sort of to doing it. And I was like, you know what? I'd been on social media for just a couple of years at that point, and I was like, you know what? I bet I can make this. I can prove to people how cool these are, and that I can prove to them I can work out the husbandry enough to prove to people that like these aren't some crazy thing to have to try to keep. Like there's simple ways to feed them. There are simple ways to husbandry them, and management isn't some sort of far off fetch thing like trying to keep Acrocordis or something, like Mike does or something like that. It's very similar to our other colubrids that we are all already keeping in the kings and the pits and all that sort of stuff. So I literally just was like that day, which was 10ish or so years ago now. I was like, all right, I'm gonna take one of these pairs home. I'm gonna see what I can go forward with in the coming years and try to bring these things that I have loved for so many decades into the herpetoculture world. And I think I kind of have. I think there's a long way to go. I think there's a
I
lot of
think you have.
question out there still. There's a lot of lack of information out there that maybe is only available through little windows of opportunity like this, or, seeing me at a show, which has only been the past 2 years, that sort of thing. But, once I realized that, like, and I got them, I started working with them, I was like, wow, all these people are like all over in Europe and Canada and everywhere. And like, these are cool. This is awesome. This is so cool that you're doing this. Somebody's doing this. And I'm like, and that just was fuel. It was 100% fuel, to for me to just keep going with it, to work with different localities specifically, and how much variability there is just within one subspecies or species across the range. And in some cases, maybe not so much variability in a couple of the species, but there's so much coolness about these animals that just has been, relegated to the $5 bin on Underground's, table somewhere, that sort of thing. So
One of the things
King,
that
King,
I
King
get
Cobra food of the old days.
one of the things I get so excited about when there's someone like yourself that not only is so excited about working with a certain group of animals or species, but that is still going out in the wild to look for, to establish, the localities, but noticing the variability, from locality to locality and things. So when we think about like the ball python market, okay, and we think toss market out, we think about ball pythons and the overwhelming number of mutations that ball pythons have, or even corn snakes, and the overwhelming number of mutations. And I think to myself, there's so many other species that there has to be more than just an albino out there. You know what I mean? That there's got to be so many things, and you don't get these, you don't ever know about the variability, or whether it's a mutation or just a locality look or whatever, unless there's people like yourself that are still going out there and doing this stuff, and paying attention and having the eye on it and noticing the subtle difference that may end up being something even more. So I just think it's really cool that you're still doing so much with this, that it's not just like, okay, I've got my collection, this is what I have, this is what I work with. You're still out there looking at these things in the wild and coming up with new stuff. So
yeah, and being able to network with a group of guys, and Zac knows this group of guys that we're in a chat group with, that helps feed this between ourselves. More with the rat snake side of things, because most of these guys are heavy rat snake guys, but most of them help me with my water snakes, and a couple of them are pretty passionate Nerodia guys as well. So it allows me to work with localities that I've not found any in that particular area. I may have been to that area a bunch of times, but I've never seen a rat snake from that area. I've not been there at the time of the year, the time of day to find water snakes in that area, or just to struck out repeatedly, but somebody lives closer and they can go work that area and turn up some stock for me to give a try, and see how those compare to the ones I may have from 2 counties away or whatever. It's a huge passion feed between us.
So with that being said, I want to dive into Nerodia now. So before, I know bandids and salt marshes and diamondbacks and erythrogaster work. I actually want to ask a question before we dive into the ones that work, about the species that we don't see being kept, because I thought about this a little bit over the summer. I was like, do I want to do that? Do I not want to do that? And one of the things that's nice about Nerodia is that usually when you find them, they're common to abundant. So I never really felt bad plucking out a couple Nerodia from a population, because there's always many, many more. So with that being said, though, the 2 species that I never see being kept, well, I guess 3 technically. There's the greens, which is the Florida green, Nerodia floridana, and then Mississippi green, Nerodia cyclopean, and then the browns, Nerodia taxospilota. And there are other Nerodia, like harder eye and all those, and we're not going to get into the taxonomy of that. So we're leaving the protected ones in Texas that were recently.
Well, the one has been downlisted in Texas.
Yeah, I was just about to say, which has recently been unprotected. But why are the greens in the taxis not seen? I know that like because greens to me, being that I like hyper aggressive animals that get large, they were very high on my list, and I kept a couple in the past that did okay. But I just always wondered why those aren't. Why your opinions are.
My opinions are is somebody really has to put a lot of time and money and space into figuring them out better, because they just don't seem to thrive. I've tried them repeatedly, both species, and I can get them on the rodents. I don't really have any trouble getting them going. And I've started with both, like, captive born from wild caught rabbits. I've started with animals I've collected or a friend has collected in both cases, and they seem to do great for a while, whether it's 8 months, 10 months, 12 months, maybe even out to 15. And then they just suddenly start failing. And I don't know why. And I haven't put any more time, because it's been 5 or 6 years since I've tried any again, just because my failure rate was what it was at the time. And I'm just like, I'm gonna step back on those at the moment, and maybe I'll go back down that road again at some point. But right now, I'm just not. And I know one guy that had been keeping his grain for several years. Like, he'd had it for 3+ going on maybe 4, somewhere in that neighborhood, and he offered me the animal. This was just under 3 years ago, just a couple years ago. And I had gotten another animal from him, and he'd offered it to me, and I was like, look, you put way too much time and work into this animal for me to fail with it based on my track record with the species. And I'm like, so I'm not going to do it. But he worked very closely with a vet that was close to him down in Florida. And he spent a lot of money and did a lot of work on parasite management, and had some apparently really stubborn parasites to get rid of. And I think that was part of the issue with him having success, was that he had the ability to really do, and willingness to do, really extensive work with a knowledgeable vet on the matter, to work it out. And it went to somebody else. I don't know who it went to. I don't think this individual's keeping animals at all anymore, just where he was at with life and needed to part with a few things. And so I just haven't gone back down that road. I don't work close with a reptile vet. I've got friends that are reptile vets, but nobody near me. So it's just like, I work for a vet, but they're not reptile people. So I do anything, almost kind of remotely, if I do anything, vet med wise. So I just know it's not a hole I'm willing to jump in at the moment, at least. So taxis are a different story, totally different story. They're
That's the brown water
really
snake.
just the brown water snake, correct? Texas Pelota. They're really not much different than Rombifer, the Diamondbacks. I've had them in the past. I was in the neighborhood of really kind of getting my group starting to breed, and then I really started going overboard with fasciata localities, and really starting to pick up on compressicata breeding. And I let all my taxi go to others, and I haven't gotten them back. I did actually do a specific trip this spring for some, and we saw some and weren't able to get any. They were all too far away and out of reach. We just saw them from afar. So it's on my intention to get a group of tax Pelota going again. It just hasn't happened. I have found them to be really no different than keeping Rombifer. They're pretty easy, hardy, kind of good captives. Really, they were pretty cool animals to keep. It was just, I think I was up to 13 or 14 locality groups of bandits at the time, and that was more important to me. And so I moved out.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just like I had to prioritize, and bandits and mangroves became the higher priority at the time, and really now mangroves are becoming the higher priority.
So let's just dive into why bandits, mangroves are the priority.
I don't. Well, one, the bandits are just a species I grew up seeing all the time. In general, after seeing black racers in the field, but bandits were something I saw commonly growing up, and I don't know, just find them fascinating. I think their variability. I think they're you can go from one spot, despite like your classic Florida bandit is this like cool red and black banded animal with white borders on the black, but then you can find certain individuals in that within the population that most of the group looks like that'll be more yellow or be more red, and but they're a 1 in 500 animal, but you can still find them here and there. And it's just something about them. They're pretty just cool captives to work with. Uh, Relatively easy captives, and they're a good size. Females can get a good, 3 to 4 foot. I've seen some wild ones bigger than that, but in general, a good 3+ foot animals, a pretty impressive water snake. With the heaviness of their body. I know there's just something about them, and they've got a pretty broad, extensive range. From middle of North Carolina all the way down to Corpus Christi, Texas, and up the Mississippi Valley and stuff like that. So there's just a lot of room for different looks across the 3 subspecies, and then you throw in the whole headache of them freely interbreeding along the coast with Clark eye as to whether or not that really is a different species or what the heck's going on there. Just leaves for a lot of really just interesting, never-ending fascination to me. Really,
Yeah.
It just never stops. Like there's just too. I can get a population from someplace else and it'd just be different than all my others. They're just cool. I don't know. They just grew on me very quickly.
One of the things, so I was a Nerodia nut with Cypodon, the common water snake, northern water snake. And there's a couple Cypodon populations that are really cool. When you get up into New England, you get those red-bellied chestnut brown animals, which are kind of like, whoa. But the ones that live around here are like, Clint wants them so bad. They're brown on top of brown with brown bellies and brown heads. Just brown. It's great. I'm getting you them for Christmas, bud. And so I went from West Virginia with the SIPs, and then my first attempt at grad school, which did not work out, was at Florida Tech. So I went from, hillbilly town down to Florida. And one of my most vivid herp memories, it wasn't fine. It wasn't some giant Eastern Diamondback in Florida. It was the first time I went road cruising at this place called Stick Marsh. And I'm driving down the road, and this snake came out on the road, and it was this kind of orange, brown, reddish brown, cream colored thing. And my brain said Nerodia, but I could not accept that a Nerodia could be that pretty. Like it was, and I got Kathy, my wife, was with me. Slam on the brakes, and I run down and I grabbed this thing. It was a big female Florida banded. And I picked it. I was just completely gobsmacked by it. Like it had the same attitude as the Cypodon up in West Virginia, except for this thing was beautiful. And I've often thought that, people, it's just like when people go fishing, you take advantage of the thing that's most common. You don't really ever take a step back and actually look at what you're holding in your hand. But the fasciata group, if people just gave them a flipping chance, you have a color palette here that is insane. I was in the Panhandle, so I think that was Panhandle, Florida, on a crayfish biology spring trip. And I bumbled into a bunch of, they were bandids up there, I think. They look like freaking death adders from Australia. Like it was literally a water snake death adder. That's what I had in my hand. And I was just kind of like, how do people not love this thing? Like, and they had done the defensive posture where they spread their ribs out and put their head out. I'm like, it looks like a damn death adder. And meanwhile, earlier in the week, we were in another part of the Panhandle of Florida, and we were getting these like really, really dark animals that didn't look anything like that other animal. So like for people that are into selective breeding and they want to take like a look and manifest it into a thing, I really feel like Nerodia are it. And then the other thing about these snakes that I just don't think people get is on our show, we get a lot of people. We definitely have a subset of listeners that love behavior and they love interacting with their animals, and they want to like up level how their snakes interact with them. And I'll die on this hill. Yeah, my king snakes, I love my kings. They are dumb as rocks. They come out and they just want to eat everything. Yeah. The captive Western hogs, they're okay when it comes to behavior, but let's be real, they're also kind of dumb. My Nerodia are wicked smart. Like when I walk in the room, you build this thing on 40, but there's like a relationship part. Like initially they're like, holy hell, and they flee from you. Then they realize you're the food monkey and they kind of hang out and they give you the side eye, which is kind of fun, where you could tell they're like, do I go or do I stay? And if you tongue feed them, after like 2 or 3 sessions, then it flips. And then you come in the room and these things come out. Like they literally beg for food. I keep this tank right here is the salt marsh snakes. And they're all staring at me right now. Like literally, because they know I'm the guy that gives them the food. And I've target trained them. I have videos, old videos on Instagram. If you want to see them, look those up, guys. I just absolutely love these snakes because of that. So you can get them to drop the I'm going to bite you all the time, I'm going to musk you all the time thing if you just interact with them. That's a thing I want to say right now before we go any further.
I mean, I've found with them really like, and some species are better than others, and even some localities are better than others. But in general, like bandits for one are like, they get a bad reputation because you can count anybody that encounters any of the waters in the field. It's it's a bitey, and it's not that it musks on you; it just projectile urates on you and just makes for a messy situation. But like literally, that ends in no time. Like it's over with. Like it's done. And like there's plenty that I catch in the field that are that way from the start. I think it really maybe just depends on when you're catching them, the exact what they're doing at that time, what time of year it is, all those sort of things that kind of puts them in the right mood. Because there's plenty of times that I've caught them and it's just like I'm just picking them right up and they don't care, And my captives are all the same way. I've had a few localities that are the animals are a lot flightier and not as, we'll just say, amenable to being a friendly captive, so to speak. But most of them, it's just like, if I go in there and I start working on my little rolly cart and start doing stuff, and they're all watching me, and they're trying to see if I'm going to start feeding or if I'm going in there to do something else. Because the minute I start feeding or touching cages, they're all watching me to see if they're going to be getting fed. I mean, they're just, my rats do that too, but not as much as the Nerodia do, particularly the female Nerodia. They're there because they just want to eat every chance they can get.
So I think, in my opinion, there's probably 2 reasons that Nerodia aren't more popular, at the moment. The first would be being that they do have such a range and they are fairly common where they're at. A lot of people feel that that's it. They're super common to them. It's the, a species they see a lot, although they typically are only seeing the look of their area, and not really realizing quite the variety, when you start getting into different localities and different species. So that's one. And while hopefully, hearing some of this thus far will kind of broaden that horizon, I think the other is fear of husbandry with them. When you think water snake, you're thinking, that sounds like it's going to take a lot more than what I'm willing to mess with, So with that in mind, are we good with maybe shifting into kind of how you keep them? I want to hear, if someone is interested in Nerodia, how difficult is it to keep them? What's your setups look like?
I mean, to me, it's, I took the approach, if I think I've got this book sitting right here. Hang on. This book was my guide to keeping Nerodia. Okay. If you read what he wrote about creating an environment to keep subocs happy.
But say time out for those who are listening and not seeing this, just a complete suboc by Dusty Rhodes.
Yeah.
Who we've had on the show.
Correct.
Right. Great book. Super great book. And my good friend Bill's photo is the cover photo that wraps the outside of the thing. So anyway, and that's how I even found out about the book. But the husbandry practices that he talks about in there with using, a shaving substrate that pulls moisture out of the air, that helps keep the air dry because that's what they need. That was my approach in the beginning to go with too, because I knew I had kept Nerodia two other times historically in the past. Once, and both of them were very important learning experiences before I really delved into this head on. And one was finding some really beautiful animals when I was living in Florida in college, and learning very quickly how not to keep them. You do not just throw them in the same little rack that we had in 1992 that we made out of a speaker cabinet and with hard plastic shoebox and sweater box type things with a couple holes in the side and expect them to be happy. Like they got blisters in no time and perish. So that was learning curve one. That doesn't work. While in the zoo field, because we did naturalistic exhibits with a lot of native species, at least initially, I got to do Nerodia in a twofold, in an exhibit, mixed species exhibit, as well as in off display areas where the exhibit there was running water in there, and there was cane brakes in there, and there was cottonmouths in there, all sorts of stuff. So I got to really have an opportunity to work with some midlands and some yellow bellies in both a plain stripped down Neodesha cage inside with newspaper, hide box, and a water bowl, and also out into a big exhibit with a bunch of different animals and trying to manage that cluster of a situation, right? And so I learned that, hey, that can make them survive really well in these Neodesha cages on newspaper with a hide box and a water bowl, and they did great. So once I decided to go down this road, I at least had a bit of a blueprint of what worked and what didn't work for me in the past. And when I read this Suboc book, when I started keeping Subocs, I was like, this recipe is the direction I want to aim to. High ventilation, low humidity, at least for the way I've always lived in the Southeast, is a really important thing for all husbandry cages, for colubrids. You just really have to get that humidity down so that you're not growing the bacteria, you're not growing the mold, and it's a constant challenge to balance that and make that a suitable situation for them. So I basically just took the guidelines out of this, applied it to how I wanted to keep them, how I could afford to keep them, and decided to do it with using sterilite tubs and stuff like that, and just putting, high ventilation with 5 zillion holes and dry substrate, a water bowl, nothing more than what you put, more or less with your king snake, maybe a little bit bigger that that they can get into. But really going with that and just tweaking it the first 5 or so years, especially on successes and failures, as far as with the animals, and I had to take into account the animals that I was working with, and beyond just understanding, sorting out the husbandry. It was also, I'm working with different species and working from different areas, and all those have to take into account. But kind of found a groove for myself, so to speak, as far as what was working at one, what wasn't working. And basically, I mean, my husbandry for them is exactly the same as what I do for my rat snakes. It's all just the same cages, except for the rat snakes don't go in simple locking lid sterilite tubs, because the rat snakes can push up out of those too easily, and the water snakes can't figure out how to do that because they don't have the same body structure and climbing ability.
Do you
So
keep, do you
Clint.
keep all the different species, subspecies the same? Is there any
Yep.
adjustments that you make with any of them?
Nope. Everybody is kept the same except for cage size, based on the individual animals being housed in those cages, or group size, because a lot of times I'm raising up groups of babies together, or I have pairs or occasionally trios of adults together. Um, uh, they're basically, it's just different size versions of the same exact setup. I found that just, it don't fix what's working, but tweak what you see along the way that needs tweaking. And there's been a number of things along the way that I've tweaked. Some of it's just husbandry habits, just because we all have lives and we have more than just our animals to keep up with, and some of them are just constantly tweaking the cages to increase ventilation, or maybe not have so much water in the water bowl at a particular time, or getting on my own ass about I need to get in there more and swap water bowls out more often because they just love defecating in the water bowls, or I got to stop spot cleaning as much and do more full substrate change outs more often. Things like that, just they're very messy animals. They're high metabolism animals, just like garter snakes, and so they're very messy, and they're very messy very quickly. I mean, my rat snakes are really messy really quickly too, but the waters are more so. So it's just a matter of trying to keep a clean cage and stay on top of it and keep that humidity down as much as possible, at least for me here in the Southeast.
So for a neonate, you've just bought a brand new broadband and water snake from Darkhorse Herpetoculture. What is the setup for that animal?
Depends on whether you like tubs or need an aquarium type setup. I hate aquariums because they're glass and they break and they're heavy. But I just love sterilite tubs because they're light. You can just pick them up and move them and take them outside and clean them. And it's super easy. But whichever caging style, not too big, a baby, 10-gallon at most, maybe even a 5-gallon for a while. If it's an aquarium type setup, screen ventilation is super duper great. If you're doing a tub style, you're going to get carpal tunnel putting holes in the sides of the cage and the lid if you're not in a drawer type setup. If you're in a drawer type setup, it doesn't need to ideally be a closed rack setup. It needs to be an open format rack setup so that there's ventilation all around, so that stuff's not just air's not getting stagnant up behind, in the backs of the cabinets and stuff like that. But really just water bowl, tight hides, small hides. I love killed and dried pine. That's what I've pretty much always used since the 90s with colubrids. Some of it's just availability, affordability. It's something I can easily get from my food stores, and I've always been able to get locally. I've tried aspen a couple of times, just didn't really care for it. Texture didn't do it for me. Absorbency didn't do for me. And getting a hold of it, it's smaller bags. I got to go out of my way to find it. It's more expensive, but I've always been able to just get pine at a feed store like a mile down the street from my house whenever I've needed it. So I've always, whenever I've done colubrids or needing something to have a dry substrate like that, I've always just gone back to just using pine. So
what does feeding really neonate look like?
I use like sour cream type lids, like sour cream tubs.
I thought you were going to tell me you were feeding them sour cream. Yeah. I was like, okay, this is not a trick I've heard. So I go with sour cream to get away. Makes everything better.
They love it. They love it. But you got to go with break stuff, man. You got to go with break stuff. My husbandry style and my approach to husbandry is very dictated by a handful of people I've been exposed to years ago, and seeing how in the early formation of the Turtle and Tortoise Club of Florida, where I was one of the founding members of back in the 90s, in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, somewhere there, whenever we started that club, and seeing people like, oh, you could build these great big turtle ponds, right? And do these big elaborate cool turtle ponds and concrete it, spend thousands of dollars on these turtle ponds. Or you could bury a tarp and it'll accomplish the same thing for $20, right? You can, and getting, when I moved up here after being in correspondence with Burt Langerworth when I was still in Florida in college, and then ended up moving up here and living 45 minutes away from him. I used to get to visit him with some routineness, not as often as I should have, but and really getting to pick his mind about how he approached husbandry from an affordability standpoint. Like, how do you do this? I mean, I was a zookeeper for 10 years coming out of college. Like, I didn't have money. Like, I didn't travel. I didn't do anything. Like, I didn't have money. So, but I still wanted to do my animals. So I had to find ways to do it from the most affordable standpoint. So everything I do with my animals is, how can I do this? I don't care about aesthetics. I need to be able to do it in a practical sense, in a reusable sense, and an affordable sense. So I learned a lot of husbandry approaches by visiting Burt and seeing how he built stuff and how he kept stuff and climbing in his cages and stuff back then, and how he raised his insects and all that kind of stuff. And so I save I haven't in years needed to, but I save sour cream containers and cottage cheese containers, and I use the hell out of those as water bowls, and I use the lids to feed baby water snakes on. So I take one of those little sour cream lids from like a 16-ounce type container, and I have stacks of those. I have bulk bins full of those things, and I just cut up some pinkies into little small pieces. Um, Not bigger than what their head is, depending on how many there's in the bin in that particular group at the time. Usually smaller pieces if there's more of them, so that they can grab them quick and swallow them quick and not fight over them, much in the same way that the garter guys do. Um, and then plus or minus fish, depending on where that particular snake or group of snakes are with feeding. I catch a lot of gambusia or wild mosquito fish, and I freeze those. And sometimes it's tricky feeders. I do use some live to get feeding responses going well. But gambusia are like absolute crack to baby Nerodia. It's
Yeah.
it's like baby Nerodia are crack to king snakes. Gambusia is crack to baby Nerodia, and so that odor is a quick thing. So I'll usually go and catch some when I have a bunch of babies that aren't jumping on something right away. I'll get them going with some live, but then I'll start freezing them, and then I can use those to cut up or hold depending on the size that they are, and mix with the pinkies and stuff like that, or even just put the pinkies into the water that the fish are thawing in, so that it's scented. And I cut them up, and man, they go crazy. But basically, just bowl fed, much the same way all the garter guys do. Just put a plate out for them, and they hit it. And some species will take a little bit more to get onto that than others. Some of them really like to go to the bowl and get live food. But I've had plenty of particularly Florida bandits that have literally gone on extra small pinks unscented that are just wiggled a little bit in front of them in the past. So it just depends. Again, every locality and different group or whatever it is on breeding, they all vary a little bit on exactly how they start. And so each season's almost like a new game to figure out, if I'm working with something new, how those guys are going to start, how easy they're going to be, or how difficult they're going to be. But some of the localities that I've been working with for years, it's just clockwork. I know exactly how those guys are going to start for me, and it's pretty easy, so I can jump right onto it so they're successful.
So then the standard setup, be it a baby or an adult, is plastic container with a little bit of height to it, bunch of holes for ventilation, and then you've got multiple hides, pine bedding, water bowl.
Yep. Yeah, and hides are anywhere from
tray for food, and then stuff for them to get up on, so they can get up out of the substrate if they want to.
Right. I went with I always I was using just sticks from the yard or in the beginning, and I got particularly the rodeo, but the rat snakes were really no different. Just getting urates cleaned off of sticks, oak branches and stuff is just, it's pointless. Like, you can't ever feel like you're cleaning them. So my go-to has always been, when I need husbandry supplies, I need to figure out something for caging wise, is I go to Lowe's or Home Depot and I go, okay, I know what I need, and I just have to find a product or find products to be able to make whatever it is I have in my mind. So I just go and I find some chicken wire, for the sake of calling it otherwise, hardware cloth that's coated. So I want it coated, so there's no sharp edges, and it's like, I think it's green, and so I can go and cut sections of that and just have them shaped so that I can just plop them into the cage of the different size cages, whether it's a 7-quart shoebox or these great big 200-quart gigantic things that are like 75-gallon tanks or whatever they are. I've got ones that sit up in those different cages, just about to be able to give them an opportunity, other than high boxes and stuff, to get them off the substrate and give them a chance to get up and be out in the open without just sitting on the pond.
So just to throw out, since this is Nerodia centric, should you want to do a glass aquarium, that's what I do here in West Virginia, because A, I do not have as many as Chris. B, while I have the background humidity and stagnant air issue in my garage, the Nerodia are in this office. And my humidity levels in the background right now are below 30%. So I don't have, See, I don't have those issues. So
That sounds like a damn desert to me.
yeah, I keep mine. Now, for some reason, though, I just checked the garage and it's like around 56. So anyway, I keep mine in aquariums. I keep mine over water that I basically siphon out weekly. It's part of the weekly routine. And there's a submersible filter in there so I can get the gunk out. And then I just took bricks and light diffuser, or what do we call that? Egg something.
I don't know.
The same plastic grids you use in an incubation box to put the eggs up above the substrate.
Light diffuser. Yeah.
Light diffuser. Yeah. And I got the bricks up like this. I cut a shape out of that, plop it on there, put bricks on top of that, put another piece of light diffuser up on there, and then I got a lamp because mine do bask quite a bit after they eat. And but that's it. Like, the thing that's great is as long as you manage that waste stream and you manage the moisture, you're going to be fine. If you don't do that, though, you're going to get blisters. So you want to talk a little bit about blisters?
Man, it happens overnight. It literally happens overnight. And your chances of solving the situation is slim to none. It basically just, aside from you identifying it and solving the situation that caused it, it forces them into shed cycles to try to repair the situation, because the blisters turn into these little hard nodules of scar tissue, and then they're basically constantly going into a shed cycle to try to fix it. Well, when they're going into a shed cycle constantly over and over again, they're not eating, and that doesn't work well with high metabolism animals. So you end up just essentially having an animal starve to death. The blisters are caused by a stressful situation of an unideal circumstance, usually moisture related, but I swear sometimes there's other factors in there that go down that road. But it's usually moisture related in some capacity. And man, it's just that stresses them out. And so then they've got this skin issue, and then they're trying to heal it, and they're stressed because they're not eating. So it's just a cycle that it's very difficult to overcome. So it's a better to avoid than it is to get into it. And it still happens to me every now. Well, I had a litter last year that did it to me. I had a litter of baby Florida bandits that, like, it was busy for a couple of days with life and work and everything, and a couple of days post feeding these babies of, I don't know, it was maybe 10 or a dozen babies in there, and they had just made a just horrible mess. Substrate was so just in and out of the water bowl, made a huge mess. And because I didn't have time to go in and check on them, everybody in the litter got blisters. And I had some of them drag out to maybe a month before they'd all perished, but they all ultimately died on me, no matter what I tried to do. So it's better to try to avoid it the best you can. That's all I can really say. And history seems to be the case with that, is they just don't do well once they get them. Unless it's very few and just a couple little ones, then maybe you can get those through. But they're usually so stressed out about the whole thing, it just is a spiraling downhill situation.
Since we're on the topic of maladies, before we head to breeding, we got to talk about eyes. Because one of the unique quirks to Nerodia, with all the different snake species I've kept, is that they get these bizarre eye infections that no other snake I've had. I don't think I've had another snake, now I'm thinking about it, that's had an eye infection. And you were the one that coached me through this. So since this is all about informing.
So this is news to me. I didn't know this was a thing.
It's crazy. It's a weird thing. So let's just.
The best, to my understanding of it, they're lacrimal duct infections. So your tear gland that goes out of the eye and drains down into the mouth area. And they get infected, and the eye clouds up, and they frequently, in my experience, they abscess. And the whole side of the face there will swell up. And I've tried a lot of things over the past. I've only had one ever pull through, and she's still going strong. But I also took my ideas of why I think they were happening. And I haven't had one now in 2.5 plus, maybe going up since you and I had that conversation over 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, Zach. I haven't had one since because I changed, is what we had said before. When I see patterns or I see issues, I try to change my husbandry to attempt to fix what I think is happening, and I took what I thought was happening and changed my personal habits of husbandry, and I haven't had a problem again. That doesn't mean I won't have a problem again. It just means I haven't had the problem again. But I was usually having one or two a year that would have it, and I literally just think it's sanitariness in our boxes that they defecate in the water bowls, they defecate all over the cage so much, and they're constantly exposed to it. And I think that literally that is all it's from. That's just my experience but I've dealt with a lot of them over the years. And again, I had one make it through, but I haven't had one since that one because I changed my husbandry. I changed my diligence is really what it was. All right, I get home, I have a long day, and I'm like, oh, I gotta lay down, I gotta not do anything, too tired. And I'm like, no, I gotta go in there and check water bowls on the water snakes. I gotta go in there and look at the color of the pine shavings, and not spot clean it, yank it out, dump it, bleach the cage, set up a fresh cage. It's that sort of thing. It's the diligence of like, I got to stop spot cleaning and I need to break down the cages more often, more times of the year than what I had been doing. And since I changed that habit for myself, I haven't had another one.
Interesting.
Is that ultimately it? It seems like it. Time will tell. It's got to keep happening, so to speak. And then if it does happen, and I got to evaluate that specific circumstance of, was I doing my due diligence with those guys? They're messy animals, and you got to stay on top of it. When you keep a bunch of animals, like the three of us do, life gets in the way. You get behind on some things. You're like, I'll get that this weekend. I got to stop and do it now. I got to stop and do that tonight. Some of those things. This weekend, I'm not just going through and spot cleaning cages and pulling water bowls. I'm taking 6 or 8, 10, 15 cages out, and I'm bleaching those out and putting fresh pine shavings in. Those sort of things. It's just little things, because there's a lot of little things that happen in these cages that we can't appreciate as warm-blooded furry things with bacteria and funguses, particularly in these boxes. Like there's a lot of things going on in these cages that we don't appreciate enough, I think. And when you just got a single cage with a single couple snakes in your room, and that's great, it's a totally different situation when you're keeping groups of animals and you're cohabitating animals. There's a lot of mess, and it builds up quickly. Even if it doesn't look like it's building up, it is building up. And just being more diligent, and that's really literally all I did. Is I've been more diligent with my cleaning and my protocols, and I haven't had another one. So maybe that was it. I don't know.
Well, it's weird because they do, like you said, they don't seem to come back, and then they'll start the shedding, and they'll shed away the infection between the brill and the eyeball. Like for like a day, you're like, oh, there's no infection. And then it starts to cloud up. And then inevitably what will happen is the eyeball gets crispy, the infection comes back, and then they lose their damn eye. And I've had that happen now.
I haven't had it happen so much where it's been so focused on just the eye. It's always turned into an abscess of the area. And I have gone through all ends of flushing and expressing and cleaning and Tazoceps and everything, just trying different things to try to find, granted I should be culturing it, I should be doing things like that, right? Like there's a lot of should be's that just doesn't happen, you know what I mean, in everyday life. I tend to take more of an approach of, I got to figure it out, because I don't have necessarily that in my back pocket to just do anything I want with. My boss will let me do basically anything. Hey, I need to run a culture on something, he like shit. But I just tend to clean stuff up. But I was probably, whatever I was trying to do initially with it, would just topically wasn't getting the right spectrum. I needed to get gram negatives instead of gram positives. I should have been doing some genison instead of a cephalosporin. I got to use a different spectrum or something. And it's that sort of a thing. It's if I would have taken my approach to addressing it maybe earlier on, and with a veterinarian approach, I probably could have solved the problem a little bit ago, or at least identified it a little bit different. But ultimately, there's still husbandry practices that need to be fixed, and maybe I fixed it. So we'll see. Got to keep it. It's got to stay the same way for a couple more years before I can really say that was probably it.
Cool. Okay.
So
we got the two big maladies out of the way now. We've gone over husbandry, feeding them, all that
How do we
jazz.
make them?
How do we make them?
How do we make them?
Do you brumate or do you not brumate? That is the question.
I used to brumate. I don't brumate anymore, at least in the same way you guys do. I stopped that because what I was doing, I didn't like my results after several years. And that was colubrids overall, not just waters. It was with rats, and actually the problems I was experiencing was more with rats than it was with waters. That because we don't have a steady cold cycle here, we can be 80, we can be 40, we can be 20, we can be 70, and it bounces all over the place. I don't get consistent cold here. I had modified a fridge with a Ranco thermostat to create a cool environment that I could set to whatever temperature I wanted. And on the whole, yes, it worked very well. Some of the species I may only put in for 2 or 3 weeks, and others I'd put in for 12 weeks, depending on what they were, whether it was foxes or salt marsh snakes, and depending on where the locality was from, has how long I put them in for triggers. I was running into deaths, and I think it was related to cold, dry air in the fridge, the way the fridges work, that I was getting respiratory infections that weren't necessarily like overtly clinical. And this is just observational, and it wasn't consistent. I was like, oh, I lost these 2 breeders this year. I lost those 2 breeders last year, and it would just be here and there, and I was seeing too much. And then the ones that I was like, oh, I'm not going to breed these guys, and I just leave them in their cage because they're cohab together, and they're just getting exposed to the photocycle in the room. And maybe I wasn't feeding as much, during those couple months, in the darker months of the year, particularly December and the January and November and the January. Oh, those guys were breeding great for me, and I didn't want them to breed, and they weren't having problems that I was experiencing with some of the animals that were getting cooled. So I eliminated the whole cooling factor, and now I photo and food cycle instead. And I've been doing that 2 seasons now, and it's been great. So,
what does that look like then? Like, let's say, obviously you feed normally through the summer. So it's like, let's just start in September. What's happening September, October, November? Doesn't
really late August, like post Daytona. That's really my window. That's like my target time post Daytona. I start thinking about feeding my girls particularly heavier, and especially in through September, I'm feeding my girls heavier. Just giving them maybe an extra meal, or if the males I'm not a heavy feeder with my guys. Most of my guys are just I'll use the rats for example, because the rat snakes is a little easier. My big adult rat snake, they may just get an adult mouse each week. They may not get much more than that. The female may get 2 or 3 when I'm starting to try to build up a little bit of weight on them to go into a cycle. Much from what you say with the way fat stores work with creating ovulation and that sort of stuff. I take a lot of that, what you guys say, and put that to work. So I start feeding those females heavier. Males, a lot of times, some males are not really crazy about eating late summer into fall, and that's with Nerodia or rats. But with the Nerodia, the same way. The males are sometimes like, I really don't care. But I start hitting those girls pretty heavy, particularly the Nerodia girls. I may be hitting them twice a week with just something. I may just give them a hairless mouse. I may give them a fish. I may give them a couple fish. Just depends. I'll just thaw out a bunch of stuff and I start handing them out to whoever. And males may get some that week. They may not. But focusing on the girls to just make sure they get a little bit of weight before I'm going to go fasting. And then as it gets to, and I play mentally off of the photo period outside a lot with just my activity. So as I can start telling that, like, my timers on, like, let's say my python cages and stuff that are behind me and my boas, aren't matching the photo period outside, and I need to start timing them down. And I start going, okay, I got to start paying attention to what I'm doing with the colubrids. And by the time like the 1st of November runs around, I'm doing last feedings on any of the adult snakes. Like beginning of November, first week in November, just kind of depending on how that lies and how, you know, what I've got going on. I do my last feeding on those guys, and then I let them empty out, and I stop having the window open for the most part, because I'll open the window and close the window just to let heat outside in the summertime come in here and there between however the AC is working in the house. And then I'll start like just a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, I started pulling the blind down in that room so that there's only like, I don't know, 12 inches of light coming in from that window. And I let the temperature in that room kind of just cycle with whatever's happening in the house. So it's getting a handful of degrees cooler. Sorry, I had a dog scratching in front of me. I let the room get a few degrees colder than what I normally would keep it, which is usually the upper 70s, 80 range. Damn it, dog. Sorry, he's just digging on a chair in front of me. And so I just let it get a few degrees colder, like into the low 70s, you know, something like that. And because I still have baby snakes in that room, right? And I still have some baby carpets in there too, on some heat pads and stuff like that, just to give them a little heat option. And heck, I've even got some white lips that aren't even on heat in there, so I can't let the room get too cold, right? And plus the temperatures are up and down, so I can't really have it get too much unless we just happen to have a cold week sort of thing. But basically, I just take them off food and fast them for like maybe 6-ish weeks. Usually somewhere after New Year's, I put the space heater that stays in the room, and I turn it back on, and I start making it in the upper 70s in the room again, and start feeding the crap out of them. And you know, particularly anybody that I want to breed is going to be any of the girls. They're going to start getting fed like twice a week, and most of the water snakes, particularly, a lot of them start breeding right away. I don't usually see the breedings, but I'm seeing I'm constantly manually touching the snakes and palpating for ovulations and becoming gravid. Mangroves usually start hitting off right off the bat, and I start seeing breeding within the first 2 weeks of starting to warm them up and feed them. In fact, I was seeing some just as the room was changing in the beginning of November. I was seeing mangroves already courting. You know, they're like, oh, there's a change going on. I gotta start. You know, nobody was ovulating, but the boys were certainly trying. So they'll be getting ready come January, hopefully. But somewhere in there, it's not an exact set of time. I'm not like super anal or, you know, it's just somewhere in there. Like, you know, I stop feeding somewhere in the beginning of November-ish, and I start feeding somewhere right after New Year, somewhere in that way, you know, depending on how things fall and lights got going on and those sort of things. And I let the room get a little bit colder, but last year what I did is I warmed it up twice during that period just for a couple of days, and I fed like the baby snakes because it's not really cold in there, so they're still staying, you know, relatively active, but they're not being fed, so they're just kind of chilling and not really burning a whole lot. But it's okay. I don't mind them burning some. You know, I like to keep my baby snakes a little on the lean side anyways, not building up fat. So I may warm them up or take advantage of like a warm spell, you know, for a couple of days, and I go in there and feed a bunch of baby rat snakes and feed a bunch of, you know, Nerodia. Particularly, I've got some baby compressicata right now that are really, really tiny and really, really delicate, in my opinion. And so I'm trying to pay attention to get in there and make myself go in there, despite saying I need to not touch that room at all, which is what I'm trying to do. But it's a hard habit to break when you're in there so much all year, all the rest of the year, so to speak.
So we've had successful copulation. Now we got a gravid Nerodia.
Real quick before we
go for it.
And your 1-to-1 pairing, never.
Most of the time, I've tried a lot of different things, and it basically the rats in the water, so it's kind of the same. I kind of take the same approach. I've done a lot of 1.2 trios with both rats and waters. I've found that I like pairs better. There's almost always going to be a subordinate female, and then a lot of times that second female doesn't always cycle the same or doesn't breed the same because it's maybe getting bullied over food or getting food taken away more often than not, those sort of things. Um, so I've found I've tweaked it over the years that I really prefer doing pairs more often than not. It's not,
Okay.
I've got some reverse trios of one or two things where I've got like two brothers in with a female that's unrelated to them. That even though like this one particular reverse trio of mangroves, like the two brothers are completely different looking. One's like this cool faded gray with maroon belly and just really cool ghosty look, and the brother is like patternless red. But they're siblings, and they're in with this other female, and that group's been working right. Like so, and I the one thing on that note where because you brought that up, I found with Nerodia, and this has to do with males more than it does with females. Nerodia don't like to have things change, particularly males. So, and it's a tough habit for me, and it's been something I've had to work on because I want to do otherwise, but I have to leave them alone. You just set the pairs up and you leave them alone. You don't change them up. Like it's not the same mentality where most of you guys that do colubrids otherwise, and you got your racks and everybody's in their own same cages, and you're like, oh, bin C4 is going to go with H5 over here, right? Because that's going to be a cool pairing, whatever, that sort of approach. I don't have that mentality at all with my approach. Mine are these guys are going to get bred, and if it's working and they're doing well, don't change it because I have lost more animals over the years when I've changed those things and I move them into another cage or swapped partners or whatever the case may be. That's when I've had animals stress out on me and they go off food and they die. So they do great if I just leave them alone and not screw with them. But my need for genetic diversity within gene pools fights me on this all the time because I'm like, this pair's been breeding all the time and they look like this and this is what they produce phenotypically. Well, I've got these others, this new bloodline, these new animals, or from these other ones from this other side over here that are unrelated, or I want to see how this phenotype plays in with this and how those colors develop. And it's a fight to do that and want to do that. So what I've tended to do is I try to just raise up babies together that are, and I did do this a lot with particularly my mangroves, as I raise babies up together that I want to be paired up in the future. I'll raise up pairs of babies from one litter and I'll raise up pairs of babies from the other litter, and they may be unrelated completely or partially related, but I'll let those guys breed and grow up and breed themselves, and then I can take those babies and offer babies out to other people or keep back ones of those together, and I'll throw those babies together and raise them up together. It seems to work out better in my experience over the years of just leaving them alone rather than doing this dating service situation.
Reason
One,
I
I'm not
ask is
doing the dating.
I think like
But
in my mind so often when it comes to Nerodia, I've always viewed them as like wet garter snakes. You know what I mean? And so much of their mentality, their behaviors, their just a lot of what they do, they kind of mirror each other. And so I didn't know it, being that I think some garter people will
I
keep.
describe them differently than what you just said. I describe them as terrestrial colubrids that utilize aquatic environments for shelter and food resourcing.
Wet garters. Mine
That's
was a
how
lot easier. It was
yeah, they're a lot like garters. They literally, I mean, because some garters are more aquatic than others, but they're literally just like the garters when it comes to husbandry. But sorry, I had to.
yeah. And so
But
my question was more of that. When I said the 1-to-1, because I know with garters, like in the wild, you'll have these massive breeding. You have the balls. You'll have, and even in a lot of the keepers will keep a colony.
mhm.
In together. So I didn't know if you did anything like that
I,
with the
I,
waters, or if it was
I,
typically the 1-to-ones.
I do that to an extent. Again, it's when you see these big breeding balls and stuff like you're talking about, up in Canada and in more of the northern climates, that's more of just a consequence of environment and ecological niches that are available to those animals. In the South, that doesn't exist in the same way because they don't have to go to these ideal, perfect, survivable environments to live out the winter, right? Down here, they can just they're in some crack in the side of a bank somewhere above the water line, and they can come up on warm days and chill out. I mean, I've been literally out looking to view and photograph like gopher frogs and tiger salamanders and in protected habitat areas and protected species, and I'm literally finding, and it's like we're freezing cold out, right? Like the air temperature is cold, dry, and 40 degrees on a good day, and then probably colder than that, and I'm finding Nerodia with probably endangered gopher frogs in their belly in freezing temperatures in the middle of the winter, right? I'm like, this doesn't make sense. This isn't logical. But like, there's a chance, yeah, that may have been a leopard frog. It's probably a gopher frog, though, right? And because we're in a pond where gopher frogs are calling, and we're trying to actually just see a gopher frog, and we're finding the rodeo cruising these vernal ponds with food boluses in them in the middle of the wintertime. It doesn't make any sense, but that's the way the South works. Like they take advantages of stuff, whereas up north, you've got these hybridactylum areas where they come out and they have a short season, they got to breed right away and that sort of thing. So it works a little different with most of the stuff that I work with because their lifestyles aren't the same as that, but it's still the same. They in general, they tolerate each other pretty well. Girls tend to be pretty much bullies, especially food wise, and so boys tend to be pretty subordinate on the whole and hide more, and in turn don't eat as much. They don't get as big. A lot of times if I get a good meal in a male once a month, I'm pretty content with it. The girls are going to get fed at least weekly and sometimes twice a week, depending on if they're breeding mode and gravid and that sort of thing. So, but pairs is what I found works the best. At the moment, I've got a couple trios, particularly with some diamondbacks at the moment and some others. But I don't know. I just cohabiting. My thing with cohabiting has always been, and why I do a lot of these guys is like I've been keeping since the mid '80s, and we didn't understand breeding well, and particularly when you're working with exotic species, like we don't understand how to get these guys to breed. But you know what? They're sure as hell not going to breed if they're in different cages. They have a much better chance if they're in the same cage of being successful, right? Zoos used to breed stuff by happenstance just because they were on display together, right? So my idea of just like I may not understand when they need to breed, but if I have them together and they're happy, they're probably going to figure it out on their own accord, So I just tend to keep what I want to breed together on the whole.
So they've bred.
Yes.
One of the things that I was not prepared for was the babies. And it's not so much that I wasn't prepared for the babies, but I'm just going to do everybody a service that it's at this point, we're 2 hours plus into this podcast. You're thinking, oh, Nerodia, I think I'm going to do this. They don't really abide by the pre-lay shed rule.
Oh, there's nothing.
As in, you just come in one day and bam, there's 30 baby snakes or 6 baby snakes or 8
and they
baby
ate the
snakes.
night before.
You did not think they were coming.
Nope. I gave up years ago trying to figure out when my females were going to drop. Some of them kind of follow a little bit of the like common sense plan that colubrids do, but
no,
75-80% of them do not. Like they will eat the night before and have a litter of babies in the morning for me.
Yes, they don't go off food. They just
nope. Some of them do. I do have some that do follow that mode, but most of them don't. They want it to be fed right up to the last minute, and then be fed as soon as those babies drop. Well, within a couple hours.
So don't do what your pal Zac did, because he got some link. What was the Louisiana Parish broadbands?
Which ones? My Ponchatulas?
Ponchatulas.
Yeah, you had Ponchatulas. Yeah, you had my Ponchatulas.
I had 2 female Ponchatulas that were loaded with young, and here I am. Got them in a 4x2x2 PVC enclosure with sliding glass. I want us all to think about that little gap between the glass. And I'm just sitting
slats,
here.
The big open slats in the top and the back. All that good stuff.
And I'm like, I'm just going to pull them out when they do their pre-lay shed. And then both of them decided to drop their babies the same damn day. And so this office you're seeing in, lots of herping went on in this office when there were 30 plus baby broadband and water snakes all over the goddamn room because they got out of the cracks and the light holes and everything else. So after that,
my thinking also goes into how into the fact that babies are small and they just drop all of a sudden. So why I
Yeah.
drill like little 1/8-inch holes in the
Yeah.
thousands on my cages, because and I don't have water snakes in these black box cages because they're not secure enough for water snakes without some adjustments.
So you do need to put the females, which you know when they're gravid, they don't hide it most of the
It's
time.
Yeah.
So now the females, when they're gravid, they go to I have 40-gallon breeder tanks with the sliding lids from like the late 90s. And that's where they go, because there's very little chance of the little ones getting out, because they are extremely good at getting out. They are more so than any baby snakes I've ever had. And I've had garters too. And Nerodia, way more than Thamnophis in my experience, would go up. And so they will absolutely be ringing your tub, and then you open up the lid and there's a bunch of little baby snakes that, like, I've had that happen a couple times. So and then you got a bunch of baby garters, and you do what we talked about at the very beginning of this discussion to raise them up to not baby garters, you got baby waters. And now you can do what we
Wet
said
garters.
at the beginning of this discussion to raise them up to big waters.
Yeah. And the baby waters are, again, it varies a little bit based on species, subspecies, and locality. I found some to be a lot easier to start than others, and some a lot trickier to others. And basically trickier meaning some really want live to get that really good feeding response going, but all of them pretty much move over to food on a tray pretty quickly. I kind of had a rule early on, like 10 years ago, where I just can't feed live. I can't feed live. I don't want to feed live to these baby water snakes for parasite transfer reasons, particularly nematodes. And I had to get over that a couple years ago, because I had no choice. Like, I'd have whole litters that just wouldn't want to eat anything without getting them going on live, and then they'd go over to eating the way I wanted them to in a month, or whatever it would be. It just again, like we had mentioned, it's a matter for me knowing how well I know that particular project line as to how those babies are going to start. Because some of them, literally, I can just chop up some fish onto a tray and put them in there on day 2, and majority of them are going to go hit that food tray right off the bat. And others, that's not the case. So it just, people that are used to most rats and kings, it's like they've eaten 3 meals, they're for sale. Like, I don't sell water snakes that quickly. Like, a lot of times it's 2 or 3 months before I let any babies go, because I want them to get a little size on them. I want them feeding eagerly and reliably, and that sort of thing. So I tend to hang on to them for a good while, and sometimes even longer than that, just depending on how the clutches go. And sometimes maybe in a month, if I've got a particular clutch that, like, there's half the clutches just like really being pigs and are already on pink swell and all that, pinky pieces on scented well, I start letting some of them go. But there's always some in the clutches that, need a little bit more attention or a little bit more focus for a while, and need some live a little bit more often to be able to really get them away from those big gluttonous siblings and stuff like that, to get them good feeding habits going. But it's really not a whole lot different than what most people deal with garters, except for they tend to, I think earthworms tend to fall suit into the garter world a little bit more than anything that we do. It's the fish side of things, as opposed to, that crack smell of earthworms for garter snake guys.
Cool. Well, any final thoughts before we go on to our final question?
No, I'm good. Whatever you guys need.
All right. Well, this was perfect. So we ask everybody, I want to ask this one to you. Where do you like the direction herpetoculture is going? Do you not like the direction herpetoculture is going? Do you think we're going to be sustainable? Do you think the market's crashing? Which, we combat that idea. What are your thoughts on the state of herpetoculture and where it's heading?
I think it's in a great place, and I think it's going in a good direction. Regardless of the little spitter spatter battles between factions of people in the hobby, I think of how I kept stuff and how I thought about keeping stuff, in the late 80s and early 90s, to how I think about stuff these days and how accessible educational information is, literature, uh, accessibility to other people like you guys and other people to reflect ideas off of. There's so many more people in the hobby, in the field now, to be able to exchange information on. I think, and being able to do what we're doing here and being able to talk to each other and from other parts of the world, at a moment's notice. I mean, that's pretty cool, man. I mean, and that really just pushes everything we're all doing to new levels every day. So it's nothing but up and up, regardless of any little insider battle between factions of keeping styles or whatever out there.
Excellent. All right, my friend. Well, this was wonderful and perfect, exactly what I wanted to be. So thanks. With that being said, now everybody wants Nerodia because they heard Master Montross speak the gospel of the good water snakes. So if people want to get these animals, you were one of the few, and let's be real, the most well-known. So how do people reach you if they're interested in potentially picking up a water snake or a North American rat?
Facebook and Instagram are the easiest places. You can DM me in Darkhorse Herpetoculture or Darkhorse Herp on Instagram. I have a personal page, Chris Montross, on Facebook as well. I'm also over on Cold Blooded, the Morph Market thing over there. I post over there too. And I post on TikTok once in a while just to post on TikTok. But Facebook and Instagram is usually the two places I'm on the most, and sharing pictures of really cool looking water snakes and rat snakes that 5 other people think are cool. So, trying to find that 6th and 7th person out there that think they're cool and want to wear a Got Nerodia shirt and a Lowest of the Low shirt.
Mm-hmm. Heck yeah. I have both. Okay.
I want to say I had a Darkhorse Herpetoculture shirt walk into my store today.
Yes, I win. That's a win right there. That is a win.
Channing Guest came from over from Kentucky, and he knew
Hell
you were
yeah.
going to be
Yep.
on today, and so he came
Cool.
over and dropped some stuff off for me, made a big pickup, and I looked and I go, "We're going to have him on tonight." He goes, "I know." So he was excited.
Shout out to Channing for repping for me today.
Okay.
Very cool. Very
excellent. Well, thank you, bud.
Anytime you know, boys.
We will obviously have you on again. So
You know it.
Crit, or Jesus, you both start with C, and I'm old. Clint, where can people find you?
You can email me at metazotics@gmail.com. Find me on Facebook, Clint Bartley, or Metazotics on Instagram. It's MetazoticsLLC. And always take a look at what we've got out there, metazotics.com. As we said, Black Friday, all the sales are going to go live at 11:45 a.m. Central. So doors open at noon if you're local or local-ish and want to come and see it all, but you don't have to because, like I said, everything is going to be online and it's going to be massive. So enjoy.
All right. And to find me, find me at Dr. Crawdad on Instagram, Zac Loughman on Facebook. Obviously, if you're interested in going to college and working with snakes, either in a conservation perspective or a zoo perspective, by all means, consider West Liberty University and our zoo science major. We have Nerodia at the school. They're in our Snakes of West Virginia exhibit. And these salt marsh snakes are heading up to my brand new office and getting a major upgrade. They're going to be one of the focal species of that office. So I'm really looking forward to doing that here in the next couple weeks. And still have false water cobras. Shocker. So anybody interested in one of those, message me. Obviously, we have the show discount. Don't have lots of them left, but I still have a few. But with that being said, be it evening, afternoon, morning, or night, whatever time of day it is, have a good one, and we will see you on the next episode of Colubrid and Colubroid Radio.